It says on the verge of the Civil War, 91.7% of the black population were free. Do you know what that means? Right there. 91.7% of the black population were free. Now, pay attention. 1,798 people were slaves. Out of the black population, 1,798 people were slaves, as compared to the 19,829 free colored persons. That's trickery in the first degree. First of all, 91.7% of the black population being free, where they come from? They didn't come over as slaves, right? If they was all free, now that's a different from the 19,829 so-called free colored persons. Why is it different? Because free colored persons is a different legal designation for a small group of people, right? You can't be a free colored person unless you were first a captive colored person. You got to keep that in mind. It's a difference from a free man and a freed man. These is what you would call your manumission servants that they call slaves, right? So now, while we looking at a small percentage of the population, right? Now watch this. An independent black denomination was chartered in 1813 by a freed slave. Now remember what I just told you up here. Peter Spencer as the Union Church of Africans, right? Now, that's only 1,000 people that this group come from that were freed, that became part of an African doctrine unity church, right? This followed the 1793 establishment in Philadelphia of the African Methodist Episcopal Church by Richard Allen, which had ties to the Methodist Episcopal Church until 1816. Now, this becomes important because the Methodist Church concealed a lot of the tribal secrets of the original clans. So this is why you seeing this being spelled out like this, because it's really the Phoenix Rising sent this to me. This part of bringing the chiefs to the awareness of what was going on, so that when Haiti moved into their position, we'd be able to see it. Right now, leaving here. Let's see, how do I get out of here? Okay, now going back into the okay. Now we come to this. Now, this is really important to know. This is so important, but you don't understand how important this is until you really pay attention to what these people are saying. Under military, pertaining to war or the army, concerned with war, the 6th edition of Black's Law, right? It says, see note, the amendatory act to the Trading with the Enemy Act of October the 6th, 1917, right? Namely, the Emergency Banking Relief Act of March the 9th, 1933, defined the American people as the enemy legally of the United States government because of the U.S. bankruptcy through which the private international Federal Reserve System became the government creditor of the United States. They're showing you now, really pay attention. Define the American people as the enemy. They're not talking about paleface. They're saying the American people is us, those organic tribes that was already here. I've been telling y'all for the longest that we was in a hostile situation under a hostile corporation masquerading as our government, right? This right here in the Emergency Banking Relief Act, they flat out telling you what I said. They define the American people as the enemy legally of the United States government. How can you be an enemy to your government? So they called us belligerent tribes and they designated us a status. AI has hired the government deal with the non-treaty tribes. They call them belligerent tribes. And AI said the United States dealt with belligerent tribes in a variety of ways depending on the specific circumstances. Some of the most common methods included war. See that? The U.S. military often fought wars against Native American tribes, particularly in the 19th century. See, they had you thinking that we wasn't fighting the entire time. The 19th century is the 1800s, people. That's the 1800s. The 19th century is the 1800s, right? The early 1900s is where a lot of the legal maneuvering take place to trap us with jurisprudence, but we get to that in a minute. Now, it said that the U.S. military often fought wars against Native American tribes, particularly in the 19th century. These wars were often brutal and resulted in the deaths of Native Americans, right? And then it said treaty making. Now, look, how you going to make a treaty with us that involves surrendering Mother Earth when we are not allowed, or no chief believe in their heart of hearts that they are allowed to sell Earth? None of us. None of us. I wish he was down here because I would show y'all how I do it when he come back. So anyway, the U.S. government also made treaties with Native American tribes in which the tribes agreed to cede their land to the U.S. in exchange for certain rights and benefits. First of all, at that point, all of the chiefs know that no right or benefit that the government is giving us is better than the right of being a resident on this planet, on Mother Earth. We have a reverence for the planet and a reverence for our position as caretakers. Now watch what they say. These treaties were often broken by the U.S. government, leading to further conflict. What that mean? The government, remember, we canceled all treaties for fraud, that which they kept secret in the organizing of the agreements, and for non-performance, meaning that they never honored a single treaty and they broke every one that they had an opportunity to break, as often as they chose to, with no regard for any other clans, including the so-called 5 civilized tribes, which you're going to get to in a minute. Now, did you see this? The U.S. government also relocated Native American tribes to reservations. Now, the first question that I would ask, right, is who gave them the right to move the people from the land into an isolated enclosure, a zoo called a reservation? Now, who gave them permission to do that? Who told them that well, just go on and move them off their land and put them where you want them at? Just put them where you want them at. Who gave them permission to do that? Who authorized the U.S. government to relocate the native or the people that was already the organics onto a reservation? Now watch this. Which were often located in remote and inhospitable areas. That means the land they don't want, they want to send the people that they don't want on the land to the land that they don't want. This policy was intended to assimilate Native Americans into white American culture, but it often led to poverty and hardship. In poverty and hardship is because we was stonewalled, like the BRICS nation is building bricks to dam up the American currency so you can see the current flow when it backflow and push inflation back. So they gonna move us where they want, and it caused the poverty and the hardship is because they cut us off from resources. That's a military strategy that they used to call a city under siege. But we didn't live in enclosed cities like they did in Europe over here, so they had to find an alternative means. So the land that they thought that they didn't want is where they set the reservations up so that they had poor farming area. They can't sustain themselves because they can't grow crops, and all of the tribes know how to take care of themselves by living off the fat of the land. We didn't need their currency. This was so that they can assimilate us into utilizing their currency so they can economically assassinate us as a people. They're showing it to you right here and how they're dealing with the belligerent tribes. Now, the next phase is assimilation. The U.S. government also attempted to assimilate Native Americans into white American culture through education, religious conversion, and other means. This policy was often unsuccessful as Native Americans retained their own cultures and identities. You see that, people? Because we always knew who we were from ever since we've been here. Like, even in the amnesia that was caused in the Conjure War, we still kept our culture intact and it evolved. If we look back on what we call hip hop, right? All right, now, how else did they have the U.S. government treatment of Native American tribes was often cruel and unjust. How is the Negro treated in America? The so-called black man. How they treat them, right? Do they treat them worse than they treat somebody on a reservation? They run around shooting them down on a regular basis, don't they? Right? Okay, now, the methods used to deal with belligerent tribes were often violent and destructive, and they resulted in the loss of land, culture, and lives. Here are some specific examples of how the U.S. dealt with belligerent tribes. The U.S. government fought a series of wars against the Cherokee, the Creek, the Seminoles, which was the Gullah Wars. The Spaniards call them the Seminole Wars, but the tribes call them the Gullah Wars, and other tribes in the Southeast during the 1820s and 1830s. These wars resulted in the forced removal of these tribes to Indian Territory, now called Oklahoma, right? Now, the U.S. government broke the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868, which had guaranteed the Lakota Sioux control of the Black Hills. This led to the Great Sioux War of 1876 to 1877, in which the U.S. Army defeated the Lakota and their allies, right? The U.S. government, okay, now that was 100 years before I was born, and it ended up resulting in the war from 1876 to 1877. Then it said the U.S. government relocated the Navajo and the Apache tribes to reservations in Arizona and New Mexico in the late 19th century.